We were closing the store, and the patriarch vanished into thin air. Cans flew off shelves, footsteps echoed in empty offices, and a baby cried from an empty bathroom. Robertson's isn't just haunted, it's alive. I was standing at the bottom of the old wooden staircase with my coworker when we realized something was very wrong. We just watched old man Blaine Robertson shuffle up those stairs about an hour ago to do office work. The offices were directly above us, and we'd been standing right there the entire time. There was only one way down, and it was these stairs. Blaine hadn't come past us. But when I climbed up to tell him we were closing, every single light in the offices was off, pitch black. I stood at the top of those creaky stairs looking into the darkness, knowing Blaine had gone up there and never come down. He was nowhere to be found. The offices were empty and dark like nobody had been up there in hours. I'd always joked that Blaine was a vampire because the old man just refused to die, but standing there in that darkness, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. That wasn't even the worst thing that happened in that supermarket. One night, my coworker and I were trying to avoid the sounds coming from those empty offices. The footsteps and banging pipes that echoed through the whole back room, even though nobody was up there. We decided to walk circles around the store instead. As we passed the vegetable aisle, a can of green beans flew off the shelf 15 feet away from us and hit the floor. Then another can in a different aisle. Then another. Like something invisible was walking through the store, knocking cans off shelves one by one, following us. But the thing that made a bag boy quit night shifts entirely was what he heard in the women's bathroom during his dinner break. A baby crying, non-stop wailing for 10 minutes straight. He finally knocked on the door, concerned something had happened to the mother. No answer. Just more crying. He opened the door to help. The bathroom was pitch black and completely empty. I grew up in a small farm town, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and there's not much to do except work and gossip. It was the kind of town where the same families had been running things for generations, and everyone just accepted that's how it was. The only real places to shop in town were limited. There was a Shopko on the edge of town, but their prices were ridiculously high. Nobody shopped there unless they were desperate or had money to burn. The main place people got their groceries was Robertson's, a family-owned supermarket that had been in town for decades. The Robertson family basically ran it as their personal empire, and they were very active in the community. They sponsored Little League teams, donated to the schools, had their names on plaques all over town. But they also had a reputation that varied wildly depending on who you asked. Some people thought they were just cheap and stingy. Other people thought they were genuinely evil. There were rumors about how they treated their employees, about shady business practices, about the family's history in town. I started working at Robertson's as a bag boy when I was in high school. I needed the money, and it was pretty much the only job available for teenagers in town. The work itself was simple. Bag groceries, help customers carry stuff to their cars, stock shelves, clean up, whatever needed doing. But from my first day there, I could tell something was off about that place. It wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of features that all added up to this dark, oppressive atmosphere. The building itself was old, really old. It had been renovated and expanded over the years, but you could tell parts of it dated back to when the town was first established. The back rooms had these vaulted ceilings that made you feel tiny and exposed. The floors throughout the building were original hardwood that creaked and groaned with every step. Upstairs there were offices where the Robertson family handled the business side of things. Those floors were even worse, creaking so loud you could hear someone walking around from anywhere in the building. The stairs leading up to the offices were steep and narrow, made of old wood that protested every time you climbed them. There was a door hidden behind a pile of old shelves in the back that nobody seemed to know where it led. Some people said it went down under the loading dock. Others said it was an old entrance to storage areas that had been sealed off. Nobody I worked with had ever opened it, and when I asked the managers about it, they gave vague answers and changed the subject. If you asked me and the other bag boys, we all agreed that Robertson's had a dark aura around it. Something about the place just felt wrong. Heavy. Like there was a weight pressing down on you when you were inside, especially in certain areas. The absolute worst part of working there was dealing with Blaine Robertson, the patriarch of the family. Blaine was ancient. He had to be in his 80s at least, maybe older. He was too old to handle the actual business decisions anymore, but he was too stubborn and controlling to let his son take over completely. So Blaine spent his days shuffling around the store floor, making everyone's life miserable. He'd antagonize the bag boys constantly. It was like his personal mission to make us as uncomfortable as possible. He'd stand by the time clock and chastise us if we clocked in even 1 minute early. Not 5 minutes early or 10 minutes early. 1 minute. He'd be standing right there watching the clock. And if you punched in at 3:59 when your shift started at 4:00, he'd give you this long lecture about stealing company time. He'd also stand by the clock at the end of shifts and chastise us for waiting to clock out. If you finished your closing duties at 9:58 and your shift ended at 10:00, you couldn't just stand there for 2 minutes. He'd appear out of nowhere and tell you to find something productive to do. But he'd also chastise us if we weren't actively moving items every single second we were on the clock. If he saw you standing still for any reason, even if you were waiting for the next customer or waiting for someone to bring you more bags, he'd materialize behind you and give you grief about laziness. The man seemed to be everywhere at once. You'd see him shuffling slowly down one aisle, and then 30 seconds later, he'd be on the complete opposite side of the store. It was like he could teleport. I started joking with the other bag boys that Blaine must be a vampire. It was the only explanation that made sense. The man just refused to die. He'd been running that store since before my parents were born. He looked like he should have died years ago, but he just kept going. I'd make jokes about why we never heard calls over the intercom for lost children. Because Blaine already got them, I'd say. And we'd all laugh nervously. But one night, my suspicion that something was genuinely wrong with Blaine got reinforced in a way I couldn't explain away. It was a weeknight, and I was working the closing shift with another bag boy named Derek. Blaine had shown up around 9 p.m. to take care of some office work upstairs. This wasn't unusual. He'd come in at random times to do paperwork or check on inventory or whatever old men do in dusty offices. Derek and I had finished all our closing duties by about 9:30. The store was empty of customers. Everything was cleaned and stocked and ready for us to lock up at 10. So we did what bag boys do when there's nothing to do. We hung out in the stockroom, killing time until our shift ended. The stockroom was right at the foot of the stairs that led up to the offices. We were literally standing right there at the bottom of the staircase, talking and joking around, waiting for 10 o'clock to roll around. When it finally hit 10 and it was time to close up the store, I figured I should run upstairs and let Blaine know we were locking up, just in case he was still working and needed to know he'd be locked inside if he didn't leave soon. I started walking up the stairs. They creaked under my feet like they always did. About halfway up, I suddenly noticed something. It was dark at the top of the stairs. That seemed weird. If Blaine was up there working, why would it be dark? But I kept climbing, figuring maybe he'd finished and already left somehow. I got to the top of the stairs and looked around. Not a single light in any of the offices was on. It was pitch black up there. Completely dark. I stood there confused. Derek and I had been standing at the bottom of those stairs for the last half hour. Blaine had gone up about an hour before that. There was only one staircase. Only one way up and one way down. Blaine hadn't come past us. We would have seen him. We would have heard him on those creaky stairs. But he wasn't up there. The offices were dark and empty like nobody had been there in hours. I called out Mr. Robertson. Into the darkness. No answer. Just silence. I felt around for a light switch and flipped it on. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing empty offices. Papers on desks, chairs pushed in, filing cabinets closed. Everything looked normal except for the fact that nobody was there. I went back downstairs and told Derek what I'd found. We both stood there trying to figure it out. Where had Blaine gone? How had he gotten past us? Was there another way down that we didn't know about? We searched the whole store. Blaine's car was still in the parking lot. But he was nowhere in the building. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. Eventually, we gave up looking and just locked up the store and went home. The next day, I asked the other employees if there was a back staircase or another exit from the offices. Everyone said no. Those stairs we'd been standing next to were the only way up and the only way down. To this day, I don't know where Blaine went that night. How he got out of those offices without passing us on the stairs. It still bothers me when I think about it. But even when Blaine wasn't pulling his disappearing act, strange things happened in that store. Especially involving those upstairs offices. The offices had exposed water pipes running along the ceiling and up the walls. Old copper pipes that had probably been there since the building was constructed. Sometimes those pipes would make noise. Loud noise. It would sound like someone had hit the pipes with a hammer, a sharp metallic twang that would echo through the whole back room. Then silence. Then another twang somewhere else along the pipes. This happened all the time when the offices were empty and dark. Derek and I would be downstairs in the stockroom, and we'd hear twang from the pipes above us. We'd look at each other. Then another twang. Then another. We'd go check, and the offices would be pitch black with nobody up there. But the pipes kept making noise like someone was walking through the dark offices, hitting them. Footsteps were even worse. The old wooden floors in the offices creaked terribly. During the day when people were actually working up there, you could hear every step anyone took. The whole back room would fill with the sound of creaking floorboards as someone walked around above. But at night, when the offices were empty and all the lights were off, and nobody was supposed to be up there, we'd hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps creaking across the floor, walking from one end of the offices to the other. Then back again. Derek and I would be standing right next to the stairs. We could see up into the darkness. We knew nobody was up there. But the footsteps continued. Creak, 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 across the empty, dark offices. One night, the noises from upstairs freaked us out so badly that we decided we weren't staying in the stockroom anymore. We'd spend the rest of our shift walking around the store instead, as far from those offices as we could get. We started doing laps around the perimeter of the store, just walking in circles, killing time until we could clock out and leave. We were walking perpendicular to the aisles, cutting across the ends of them, when something happened that made the footsteps seem tame by comparison. We were passing the vegetable aisle when suddenly a can of green beans fell off the shelf about halfway down the aisle. Just fell right off and hit the floor with a loud clang. Derek and I stopped and looked at each other. Then we walked over and picked up the can. We put it back on the shelf carefully, making sure it was stable and not going to fall again. We started walking again. 2 aisles down, it happened again. Another can fell off a shelf. This time it was in the canned fruit aisle. We went and picked that one up too. Put it back on the shelf. Started walking again. A bit faster now. That's when things escalated. As I was putting the can back, another can flew off the shelf about 15 feet down the same aisle. Not fell. Flew. Like someone had knocked it off deliberately. We both saw it. The can was sitting there normally. Then suddenly, it launched off the shelf and hit the floor. Derek looked at me. I looked at him. Without saying a word, we both agreed we were done with this. We left that can sitting on the floor where it landed and walked quickly to the front of the store. We spent the rest of our shift huddled around the cash registers, as far from the aisles and the offices as we could get. We didn't talk much, just stood there, watching the clock, waiting for it to be time to leave. Every little sound made us jump, every creak of the building settling, every hum of the refrigerators, everything. We were on edge for the rest of the night, but the incident that really topped everything, the one that made one of the bag boys request to be taken off night shifts entirely, happened to a kid named Marcus in the break room. The break room was a small room in the back where employees could eat lunch or take breaks. It had a table, some chairs, a microwave, a fridge, and 2 small bathrooms. One marked male, one marked female. Single occupancy bathrooms. Nothing fancy. Marcus was on his dinner break one night. The store was quiet. He was sitting at the table eating a sandwich, scrolling through his phone, just relaxing. Then he heard something that made him stop mid-bite. A baby crying. Coming from the women's bathroom. At first he thought maybe he was hearing things. But no, there it was again. Definitely a baby crying. That distinctive wailing sound that babies make. Marcus had been sitting in the break room for about 5 minutes already. He hadn't seen anyone come in. Definitely hadn't seen anyone come in with a baby. And why would someone bring a baby into the supermarket at night anyway? But there it was. Crying. Loud and continuous. Coming from that bathroom. He tried to ignore it and keep eating his sandwich. But the crying continued. Just non-stop wailing. It went on for 5 more minutes. Marcus started getting concerned. What if something had happened to the mother? What if she'd passed out in there or something? What if the baby was in danger? He got up and walked over to the bathroom door. Knocked on it. "Hello? Is everything okay in there?" No response, just more crying. He knocked again, harder this time. "Ma'am? Do you need help? Is your baby okay?" Still no response from any adult. But the baby kept crying. That awful, distressing sound of a baby in distress. Marcus knocked several more times. Asked repeatedly if everything was all right. Got nothing back except that non-stop bawling. He was finally convinced that something had definitely happened to the mother. She must be unconscious or unable to respond. The baby needed help. He made a decision. He'd crack the door open just to check, just to make sure everything was okay. He wasn't trying to invade anyone's privacy. He was genuinely concerned for their safety. He put his hand on the door handle and slowly pushed it open, just a crack at first. The crying continued. He pushed it open a bit more, enough to see inside. The bathroom was completely dark. The light wasn't on. And it was empty. Totally empty. No woman. No baby. No one. But he could still hear the crying. Even with the door open, even looking at the empty, dark bathroom, he could hear a baby wailing. He quickly shut the door and backed away. The crying stopped immediately. Complete silence. Marcus grabbed his stuff and got out of that break room. He went and found the closing manager and told him he wasn't feeling well and needed to go home early. The manager let him leave. The next day, Marcus went to the store manager and requested to be taken off night shifts permanently. He wouldn't give a detailed explanation, just said he didn't feel comfortable working nights anymore. The manager asked around and eventually heard the story from one of the other employees that Marcus had told. After that, the manager didn't push the issue. Marcus got moved to day shifts only. All of us who worked nights at Robertson's had experiences like this, some more intense than others, but everyone had something. Noises they couldn't explain, things moving on their own, feelings of being watched, presences that shouldn't be there. The running joke among the night crew was that the store was definitely haunted. We'd laugh about it, but underneath the jokes, we all kind of believed it. Too many things had happened to too many people for it all to be coincidence or imagination. Some people thought it was the ghost of an old Robertson family member. Maybe someone who died in the building back in its early days. Others thought it might be related to whatever was behind that sealed door in the back. Maybe something bad had happened down there. I had my own theory. I thought maybe it was connected to Blaine somehow. The way he seemed to be everywhere at once. The way he disappeared from locked offices. The way he just refused to die despite being ancient. Maybe he was the source of all the weirdness. Maybe he was something other than human, and his presence in the building was causing all these strange occurrences. I never found out the truth. I worked there for 2 years, and then moved away for college. I heard the store eventually got sold to a regional chain, and the Robertson family retired. I don't know if Blaine is still alive, or if he finally died. I don't know if the new owners experienced the same weird stuff, or if it stopped when the Robertsons left. But I'll never forget working those night shifts at Robertson's. Standing at the bottom of those stairs listening to footsteps in empty offices. Watching cans fly off shelves by themselves. Wondering where Blaine had disappeared to this time. That place taught me that some buildings have a presence to them, an atmosphere that can't be explained by architecture or age alone. Something about Robertson's was fundamentally wrong. Dark. Heavy. Whether it was ghosts or something else, I don't know. But something was there with us on those night shifts. Something that made noises and moved objects and cried in empty bathrooms. Something that made even the bravest bag boys huddle together by the registers, counting down the minutes until we could clock out and escape into the normal world outside. I've worked plenty of other jobs since then, but nothing has ever felt quite like Robertson's. Nothing else has had that oppressive atmosphere, that sense of wrongness lurking in the corners. And whenever I see an old family-owned store now, I wonder what happens there after closing. What walks those aisles in the dark? What makes noise in the back rooms when no one's supposed to be there? Because now I know that some places, some buildings, they're not empty just because the customers have left. There's something else there. Something that comes out when the lights go down and the doors are locked. Something that refuses to leave, no matter who owns the building or how many times it changes hands. Just like old Blaine Robertson, shuffling through his store, antagonizing the bag boys, appearing and disappearing at will. A presence that just refuses to die. She's always been there. My wife thinks I'm crazy when I check the corners of rooms before we go to sleep. She laughs when I insist on leaving a nightlight on in the hallway. She rolls her eyes when I pause at doorways, listening for sounds that aren't there. But she wasn't there when I was 4 years old. She didn't see the little girl with yellow hair standing in the corner of my bedroom, smiling at me with too many teeth. My name is James Carter, and I've been haunted my entire life. Not by a house, not by a place, by something that follows me wherever I go, something that's been with me since I was a child, something that won't let me go. And the worst part, I think it's getting closer. Let me start at the beginning. I was 4 years old when I first saw her. It was winter in Michigan, and I had caught some kind of terrible flu, the kind that knocks you flat for days. Fever so high my parents were talking about taking me to the hospital. I remember lying in my small bed surrounded by stuffed animals and dinosaur sheets, feeling like my whole body was on fire. My room was on the second floor of our old farmhouse. It had pale blue walls and white curtains that my mom had picked out. During the day, it was bright and cheerful. At night, with just the small lamp on my nightstand, the corners got very dark. That's where she stood. I didn't notice her at first. I was too sick, drifting in and out of feverish sleep. But at some point during the second day of being bedridden, I woke up, and she was just there, standing in the corner farthest from my bed, perfectly still. She looked like a little girl, maybe my age or a bit older. She had long yellow hair that hung down past her shoulders. She wore a white dress that looked old-fashioned, like something from a history book. And she was smiling at me. I wasn't scared at first. When you're 4 years old and sick with fever, your brain doesn't always work right. I thought maybe she was a friend of my sister's, or maybe a neighbor kid who had come to visit. "Hi," I said, my voice scratchy from the fever. She didn't answer, just kept smiling. But she tilted her head slightly, like a curious puppy. "Do you want to play?" I asked. This time she nodded, slowly, deliberately. "I can't," I said. "I'm sick. My mom says I have to stay in bed." She raised one hand and pointed at me. Then she curled her finger, beckoning. "Come here. Come play with me." "I can't," I said again. "Maybe when I'm better?" She kept beckoning. Her smile got wider, too wide. I remember thinking that her mouth looked wrong somehow, but I couldn't figure out why. That's when my parents came in. My mom was carrying a tray with soup and crackers. My dad was right behind her. They were talking about my temperature and whether they should call the doctor again. Then they saw me talking toward the corner. "James?" my mom said. "Honey, who are you talking to?" I pointed at the corner, the little girl. "She wants me to come play with her." My parents both looked at the corner. I watched their faces change. My mom went pale. My dad's jaw tightened. "What little girl, buddy?" my dad asked, his voice careful. "The one with the yellow hair. She's right there." I pointed again more insistently. My mom set down the tray so fast, some of the soup sloshed over the side. She grabbed my dad's arm. They both stared at the empty corner. Empty to them, anyway. To me, the girl was still there. Still smiling. Still beckoning. "James," my mom said, her voice shaking slightly. "There's no one there. It's just the fever making you see things. But she's right there." I insisted. "Can't you see her?" My parents exchanged a look, the kind of look adults share when they're worried but don't want to scare the kids. "Come on," my dad said to my mom. "Let's let him rest." They backed out of the room, never taking their eyes off the corner. My mom left the tray on my dresser. The door closed softly behind them. I looked back at the corner. The girl was gone. I didn't see her again for a long time after that. Years, actually. My parents never talked about the incident. When I brought it up once when I was older, my mom just said I had been very sick and had hallucinated. Fever dreams, she called them. I wanted to believe that. I tried to believe that, but deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. The next time something happened, I was in college. 20 years old, living in my first apartment off campus. It was a small townhouse in a complex that mostly housed students. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen and living room. I lived alone, which I loved. Freedom. Independence. No roommates to deal with. It was a Tuesday night around 9 o'clock. I had just finished studying for a biology exam and needed a bathroom break. Normal, boring, everyday stuff. I went into the bathroom, did my business, and was washing my hands when I heard it. Scrape. a distinct sound of something dragging against the outside of the bathroom door, like fabric or paper being pulled across the wood. I paused, hands still under the running water. The coat rack was on the other side of that door. I must have bumped it on my way in, and my jacket had fallen. No big deal. I finished washing my hands, dried them on the towel, and opened the door, expecting to see my jacket on the floor. The floor was empty. I stood there, staring at the clean tile floor. The coat rack stood against the wall, exactly where it always was. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was out of place. Then I remembered. My jacket was in the car. I had left it there after class. I looked around the apartment. All the windows were closed. I didn't have any pets. There were no bugs in the area big enough to make that kind of noise. And I was absolutely, completely alone. I checked every room anyway. Bedroom, living room, kitchen, even the small closets. Nothing. No one. But I had heard it. That scraping sound. I knew I had. I tried to convince myself it was pipes in the walls. Old buildings make noises. That's normal. Rational. Scientific. But my hands were shaking as I went back to studying. A few weeks later, I was lying in bed late at night. I had fallen asleep with the window open because it was a warm spring evening. I liked the fresh air. I woke up suddenly. No idea what time it was. The room was dark except for the faint glow of my alarm clock. There was something on my chest. Not something heavy. Not painful. Just cold. Extremely cold. Like an ice cube pressed against my skin through my t-shirt. I lay perfectly still, my heart pounding. A cool breeze, I thought. Just the night air coming through the window. I rolled over to check the window to see if the temperature had dropped. The air coming through the window was warm. Balmy. At least 70 degrees. But the cold spot on my chest remained. I could feel exactly where it had been, like a handprint made of ice. I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. The room flooded with light. Empty. Completely empty. I got up and closed the window. Locked it. Checked under the bed. In the closet. Behind the shower curtain in the bathroom. Nothing. But I knew what I had felt. A hand. A cold hand pressed against my chest. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. After I graduated college, I moved back in with my parents while I looked for a job and saved money. They had moved to a new house while I was away at school. A nice 2-story place in the suburbs. My room was upstairs, about 10 feet down the hallway from the top of the stairs. The stairs led down to a foyer by the front door. It was a pretty standard layout. I had been home for about 3 months when it happened. I was standing at the top of the stairs one afternoon, talking to my mom. She was down by the front door, sorting through mail. We were discussing dinner plans or something equally mundane. Then we both heard it. "Hello," a female voice, clear as day, coming from my room. My mom and I both froze. We locked eyes. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Your room," she whispered. The voice had definitely come from my room. Not from outside. Not from downstairs. From inside my room, which was supposed to be empty. "Stay here," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I walked slowly down the hallway to my room. The door was half open, the way I had left it. I pushed it open fully and looked inside. Nothing. The room was empty. My bed was made. My desk was cluttered with job applications and my laptop. The window was open, but only a few inches. Could someone have shouted from outside? My mom called from the stairs. I looked out the window. The nearest house was 50 feet away. The street was quiet. No one was outside. It would have to be really loud to sound like it came from in here, I called back, and it didn't sound like someone yelling. It was normal volume, like someone was right here in the room. My mom came up the stairs and stood in the doorway. She looked pale. "This is the second time," she said quietly. "Second time? What? Second time something like this has happened with you?" She looked at me with worried eyes. "When you were 4, you talked to someone who wasn't there. Now this." "Mom, that was a fever dream. You said so yourself." "I know what I said." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But James, honey, what if it wasn't?" We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then she shook her head, as if clearing away unwanted thoughts. "Let's just forget about it," she said. "Probably just weird acoustics or something." But neither of us believed that. A few months later, I was getting ready to move into my own apartment again. I had gotten a job and saved enough for first and last month's rent. My mom was helping me pack. I had switched bedrooms a few weeks earlier to the room across the hall. My old room was going to become my mom's craft room. We were boxing up the last of my stuff when we heard it. Laughter. Female laughter. Light and musical, but with something off about it. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was coming from my old room. The room we had just left. My mom and I both ran to the doorway. The room was empty. Boxes stacked in the corner. Bare mattress on the bed. Nothing else. But we had both heard it. Both of us. Clear as a bell. "Okay," my mom said, her voice shaking. "That's it. We're saging this house." "Mom, that's not. I don't care if you think it's silly. We're doing it." She bought sage bundles the next day and burned them in every room. I humored her, even though I didn't really believe it would do anything. I moved into my new apartment a week later. It was a nice place on the 3rd floor of a modern building. Safe. Secure. New construction, so no history of previous tenants or tragic deaths or any of that horror movie nonsense. I should have known it wouldn't matter. The apartment had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a decent-sized living room and kitchen. I lived alone again, which I preferred. No roommates to explain things to. No witnesses to the weird stuff that seemed to follow me around. For the first few weeks, everything was fine, normal. I started to think that maybe my mom's sage burning had actually worked. Maybe whatever had been following me was tied to that house. Then, the feeling started. I would be sitting on my couch watching TV and suddenly feel like someone was standing behind me. I would turn around and no one would be there, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I would be cooking dinner and sense someone watching me from the doorway. I would look and the doorway would be empty, but I could swear I felt eyes on me. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the absolute certainty that someone was in my room. I would lie there in the dark, too scared to move, listening to nothing but my own heartbeat. "You're just stressed from the new job," I told myself. "New apartment anxiety. Perfectly normal." But I knew better. One night, about 2 months after moving in, I was asleep in my bed when something woke me up. Not a sound. Not a feeling. Someone shook me. I felt hands grab my arm and physically push me hard enough to move me on the mattress. The bed rocked slightly from the force. My eyes snapped open. I was instantly, completely awake. This wasn't one of those situations where you wake up confused and disoriented. I was alert and aware, and absolutely certain that someone had just touched me. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing. My first thought was that someone had broken in. A robber, a crazy person, someone dangerous. If they thought I was still asleep, they might leave me alone. They might just take whatever they wanted and go. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes. Listening, waiting, nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no sounds at all. Finally, I worked up the courage to reach over and turn on my bedside lamp. The room was empty. I got up, my legs shaking, and checked every inch of the apartment. All the doors were locked. All the windows were closed and latched. I was on the 3rd floor, so no one could have climbed in even if they wanted to. But someone had touched me. I knew it. I had felt it as I was checking the apartment. Something caught my eye. On the carpet next to my bed were 2 light-colored spots. The carpet was dark blue, and these spots were clearly visible. They were in the shape of footprints, not like someone had stepped in something and tracked it. These were depressions in the carpet, like someone had been standing there for a while, long enough for their weight to compress the fibers, right where someone would stand to lean over and push someone awake in bed. I looked at the rest of the carpet. No other footprints. No trail showing someone walking to the bed or away from it. Just those 2 prints. Standing right next to where I had been sleeping. I didn't sleep in my bedroom for a week after that. I slept on the couch with all the lights on. The final incident happened just a few months ago, after I got married. My wife Emily is wonderful, practical, logical. She doesn't believe in ghosts or supernatural anything. When I told her about the weird things that had happened to me over the years, she listened politely and then suggested I might want to talk to a therapist. I didn't blame her. If someone told me that story, I would probably think they were either lying or mentally ill. We had been married for about 6 months and living together in the same apartment I had been in before. Emily had moved in after the wedding. One night, I woke up randomly around 3 in the morning. No reason, just suddenly awake. I felt someone walking down the hallway from our bathroom. We had a master bathroom that was connected to our bedroom by a short hallway within the room itself, about 8 feet long. I could feel footsteps. Not hear them. Feel them. Like the vibration of someone walking was traveling through the floor and into my body. I assumed it was Emily coming back from using the bathroom. I kept my eyes closed, starting to drift back to sleep. Then I felt Emily move behind me. She rolled over in bed, her arm draping across my waist. My eyes snapped open. If Emily was in bed next to me, then who was in the hallway? I stared into the darkness, my heart racing. The hallway from our bathroom was directly in my line of sight. I could see the dark opening, barely visible in the faint light from the alarm clock, and I could feel someone standing there, standing in that hallway opening, looking at me. The presence was so strong it was almost physical, like pressure in the air. Like the feeling you get when someone stands too close behind you. I wanted to turn on the light. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do anything except lie there frozen in terror. But I couldn't move. The presence stayed there for what felt like an eternity. Watching. Waiting. Then, slowly, the feeling faded. Like whoever or whatever it was had turned and walked away. I finally worked up the courage to reach over and turn on the lamp. The hallway was empty. The bathroom was empty. Everything was normal. Emily stirred next to me. "James? What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. "Just needed to check something." She mumbled something and went back to sleep. I stayed awake until dawn. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've been doing research, trying to find answers. I've read about spirits that attach themselves to people instead of places. About entities that feed on fear or attention. About residual hauntings and intelligent hauntings and poltergeists. I've talked to mediums and psychics and paranormal investigators. Most of them are frauds, but a few have said the same thing. Something has been following me since I was a child. Something that looks like a little girl with yellow hair. Something that wants my attention. And it's getting stronger. The incidents are getting more frequent, more physical, more bold. It used to just watch from corners. Then it started making sounds. Then it started touching me. Now it's standing over me while I sleep. What comes next? I asked one of the psychics this question. She looked at me with sad eyes and said, "Eventually, she'll stop trying to get your attention. She'll try to keep it. Permanently." I asked what that meant. "Possession," she said simply. "Or she'll try to pull you over to her side. Make you like her. Neither option is good. I don't know if I believe in possession. I don't know if I believe in any of this, really. But I can't explain what's been happening to me. Emily still thinks I'm having stress-induced hallucinations. My parents don't want to talk about it. My friends think I'm making it up for attention. But I know what I've experienced. I know what I've seen, and felt, and heard. And I know that every night when I go to bed, there's a chance I'll wake up to find her standing over me. The little girl with yellow hair. The girl who's been with me my whole life. The girl who won't let me go. Last week, I had a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. I was back in my childhood bedroom. I was 4 years old again, sick with fever, lying in my small bed. She was standing in the corner. The same corner as before, same yellow hair, same white dress, same too wide smile. But this time, I could see her clearly. Every detail. Her hair wasn't really yellow. It was blonde that had faded to a sickly yellow color, like old newspaper. Her white dress was stained with something dark around the hem. Her skin was too pale, almost translucent. And her eyes, God, her eyes, they were completely black. No whites, no irises, just solid black from edge to edge. She beckoned to me with one finger. "Come here, come play." In the dream, I got out of bed. I walked toward her. I couldn't help it. My body moved on its own. As I got closer, her smile got wider and wider, until her mouth was stretched impossibly large, showing rows and rows of teeth that looked too sharp. She reached out her hand toward me. Her fingers were too long, too thin, with nails that curved into points. Just before she touched me, I woke up. I was in my bed, in my apartment, with my wife sleeping peacefully beside me. Morning light was streaming through the windows. Everything was normal. Except for one thing. On my arm, right where she had been reaching in the dream, were 5 small scratches. Thin red lines, like someone had dragged their fingernails across my skin. Emily saw them at breakfast. "What happened to your arm?" "I don't know," I said. "Must have scratched myself in my sleep, but the scratches were on the outside of my arm. In a place I couldn't have reached while sleeping, in a pattern that perfectly matched 5 fingers reaching out to grab. I've started sleeping with the lights on again. Emily complains, but I don't care. I need to be able to see if something is in the room with me. I've started checking corners before entering rooms, looking under beds and in closets, listening for sounds that don't belong. I've started wondering if this will ever end, or if she'll be with me forever. The little girl with yellow hair who's been haunting me since I was 4 years old. Sometimes I wonder what she wants. Why me? Why has she been following me for my entire life? Is she trying to hurt me? Or does she just want a friend? Is she evil? Or is she a lost child, alone and scared, clinging to the one person who ever acknowledged her existence? I don't have answers. All I have are questions and fear, and the growing certainty that whatever this is, it's not over. It's never going to be over. Emily asked me yesterday why I've been so jumpy lately, why I keep staring at empty corners, why I insist on checking the locks 3 times before bed. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to explain everything. But how do you tell someone you love that you're being haunted, that something has been following you your whole life, that you're terrified it's only going to get worse? So I just said I've been stressed at work. She accepted that answer. But I know the truth. She's still here. She's always been here. And she's getting closer. One day soon, I'm going to wake up, and she'll be standing right over me. Close enough to touch. Close enough to whisper in my ear. And when that happens, I don't know what I'll do. Run? Fight? Scream? Or will I finally do what she's been asking me to do since I was 4 years old? Will I finally take her hand and come play with her? Part of me is terrified of that moment. But another part of me, a small dark part that I don't like to acknowledge, is curious. What would happen if I stopped running? If I stopped being afraid? If I just accepted that she's part of my life and always will be? Would she leave me alone? Or would that be the worst mistake I could ever make? I don't know. All I know is that tonight, like every night, I'll go to bed with the lights on and my eyes on the corners, waiting, watching, hoping that when morning comes, I'll still be myself and not something else, not something that belongs to her. The girl with yellow hair who's been haunting me my entire life. The girl who's always been there. The girl who will never let me go. I went there where winter nights whisper living pain, and I saw what can never be forgotten. The house my brother rented that winter should have been a warning. 6 bedrooms in a village that barely had 50 houses, stone walls thick enough to keep out the worst Highland storms. Rooms full of furniture that nobody wanted anymore, covered in dust and secrets. But rent was cheap, and we both needed work. So he took the house, and I moved in with our mom half a mile down the road. We thought we were lucky. We were wrong. My name is Colin MacLeod, and this is the story of the winter I learned that some places remember. And some things never leave. The Northwest Highlands of Scotland are beautiful in the summer. Rolling heather moors that turn purple in August. Mountains that touch the clouds. The sea crashing against black rocks, wild and free. Tourists come from all over the world to see it, to photograph it, to say they've been there. But in winter, it's a different world entirely. The darkness comes early. By 3 in the afternoon, the sun is already setting. By 4, it's pitch black. The wind howls across the moors like something alive and angry. The rain doesn't fall so much as attack, coming at you sideways with the force of the Atlantic behind it. And the cold. God, the cold gets into your bones and stays there. Our village sat right on the edge of the sea. Maybe 50 houses spread out along a few miles of coastal road. A handful of streetlights that did almost nothing to push back the darkness. Beyond those lights, there was nothing but empty moorland, ancient mountains, and the North Atlantic Ocean. It was February, when my brother Callum found the house. We were both working at the salmon farm, 12-hour shifts in freezing water and biting wind. The pay was decent, but the work was brutal. We needed somewhere close to the farm, and housing in the Highlands isn't easy to find in winter. The house sat at a bend in the road, tucked back in a cluster of old pine trees. You couldn't see it from the main road unless you knew it was there. Stone construction, probably 200 years old, with those small windows that were meant to keep the heat in and the cold out. 6 bedrooms, the landlord had said. Big kitchen, living room with a fireplace, shed out back, available immediately, cheap rent. Callum took it without even asking why it was so cheap. I helped him move in on a gray afternoon, with sleet coming down like needles. The house was cold inside, colder somehow than it was outside. Most of the rooms upstairs were full of old furniture, wardrobes with missing doors, beds with sagging mattresses, boxes of books and clothes and things that nobody had wanted enough to take with them. "You're really going to live here alone?" I asked, looking at the dusty hallway that seemed to stretch forever into darkness. "It's just stuff," Callum said. "I'll use the downstairs bedroom and the living room. Maybe clear out one of the rooms upstairs eventually. What about all this junk?" He shrugged. "Landlord said I could do what I want with it. Chuck it, keep it, whatever. I'll deal with it when it gets warmer." So the rooms stayed full, doors stayed closed, and Callum settled in to live in a 6-bedroom house using only 2 rooms. I visited a few times those first weeks. The house always felt off to me. Not scary exactly, just wrong, like wearing a coat that doesn't quite fit. The rooms were too big, the hallways too long. The stairs creaked in patterns that sounded almost like footsteps. "Don't you get creeped out here at night?" I asked him once. "Nah," he said. "It's just an old house. They all make weird noises." Callum wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. He was practical, scientific. He believed in what he could see and touch and explain. So I didn't push it. Besides, I had my own place at our mom's house. A cozy little stone cottage with 2 bedrooms, a warm fireplace, and none of the weird feelings that Callum's house gave me. I was fine. Then Callum and I decided to set up a gym. There was a room on the ground floor of his house that was mostly empty. Just an old desk and some chairs. We cleared it out, brought in some weights and a bench press we bought used, put down some mats. Nothing fancy. But it was enough for us to work out together after our shifts at the farm. I got a key so I could use it whenever I wanted. That's when I started spending real time in that house. And that's when I started to notice things. It was always during the day when I went there. After the morning shift or before the evening one, I'd unlock the front door, walk through the cold hallway, and go straight to the gym room. Work out for an hour, leave. Simple enough, except for the sounds. The first time I heard them, I was on the bench press, lifting weights alone. The house was completely silent except for my breathing and the clink of the weights. Then, from upstairs, I heard footsteps. Not creaking floorboards, actual footsteps. The distinct sound of someone walking across the floor. From one end of the room above me to the other. Slow and deliberate. I sat up, letting the weights clank down. "Callum?" I called out. No answer. But Callum was at work. His car wasn't outside. I was supposed to be alone in the house. I listened hard. The footsteps had stopped. Maybe I had imagined it. Old houses settle. Pipes expand and contract. Wood shifts with temperature changes. I went back to my workout. 10 minutes later, I heard it again. Footsteps. This time accompanied by a sound like something heavy being dragged across the floor. A piece of furniture, maybe. Something with weight to it, scraping slowly from one side of the room to the other. I stood up and looked at the ceiling. The sound was coming from directly above me. One of the unused bedrooms. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I should have gone upstairs to check. That would have been the smart thing to do. Confirm that nobody was up there. Prove to myself it was just house noises. But I didn't want to go upstairs. Something about those dark hallways and closed doors made my skin crawl. And it was broad daylight. Middle of the afternoon. Nothing scary about the middle of the afternoon. So I finished my workout quickly and left. I didn't tell Callum about the sounds. He would have just said it was the wind or the house settling. And maybe he would have been right. But I started working out at different times, trying to avoid being in that house alone. It was 3 weeks later, when Callum had his experience. I was at home, lying in bed around 11 at night, when my phone rang. Callum's name on the screen. "You awake?" he asked when I answered. "Yeah, what's up? Can you come over? Like, now?" There was something in his voice. Tension, maybe fear, though Callum never admitted to being afraid of anything. "What's wrong? Just come over. Please." I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and walked the half-mile up the dark road to his house. The wind was strong that night, but not howling. Just a steady push from the west, bringing the smell of salt and seaweed from the ocean. Callum was waiting by the door. He looked pale in the porch light. "What happened?" I asked. He led me inside to the living room. It was warm, the fireplace still crackling with a low fire. The TV was on, some nature documentary playing on mute. "I was sitting right here," Callum said, pointing to the couch, watching TV. "Just a normal night." "Okay." "The door." He pointed to a door on the far wall. "That door leads outside. Been seized shut for years," the landlord said. "Can't even open it." I looked at the door. It was old, wooden, with peeling green paint. A small window at the top, covered by a curtain. What about it? The handle started moving. I waited for more, but he just stood there, staring at the door. The wind? I suggested. That's what I thought at first. But it wasn't the whole door shaking. Just the handle, like someone was grabbing it from outside and trying to turn it. Rattling it up and down, trying to get in. Maybe an animal? Colin. He looked at me, and I could see he was genuinely spooked. The windows. You can see outside that door from the windows. He was right. The living room had big windows that looked out onto the same area as that door. You could see the ground outside, the trees, everything. And there was nothing there, Callum continued. Nobody standing at the door. Nobody crouching down. Nobody hiding. The door handle was just moving on its own. How long did it last? Maybe 2 minutes. Felt longer. Then it just stopped. We both stared at the door. It looked completely normal. Just an old door in an old house. You want me to check outside? I offered. Already did. Nothing. No footprints in the mud. No marks on the door. Nothing. We sat in the living room for another hour drinking tea, not talking much. The door handle never moved again. Eventually I went home. But I don't think Callum slept much that night. He looked exhausted the next day at work. You should tell the landlord, I said during our break. Tell him what? That a door handle moved? He'll think I'm mental. Then move out. Find somewhere else. Callum shook his head. And go where? There's nothing available. And it's just a weird house noise. That's all, but I could tell he didn't really believe that. Things escalated after that. Callum started hearing footsteps upstairs at night, the same ones I had heard during the day, but worse. Louder, more frequent. Always when he was alone. Always after dark. He would be sitting in the living room and hear someone walking around in the bedroom above him, back and forth. Back and forth. He would turn up the TV volume to drown it out. Sometimes he would hear doors opening and closing upstairs. The slow creak of hinges. The soft click of a latch. He never went up to check. Neither would I. I stopped using the gym altogether. Started working out at home instead. Callum didn't blame me. Then one night in early March, during a particularly bad storm, Callum called me again. I'm leaving, he said, tonight. I can't stay here anymore. What happened? Just come over. I need help packing. When I got there, he was throwing clothes into bags, grabbing his important stuff, moving fast like something was chasing him. Callum, what the hell happened? He stopped and looked at me. I saw someone. What? Upstairs, I heard the footsteps again. Louder than ever. And I got angry, you know. I was tired of being scared in my own house. So I went upstairs with a torch to prove to myself there was nothing there. And the door to the front bedroom was open. It's never open. I always keep it closed, but it was standing wide open, and there was someone inside. My blood ran cold. A person, like a homeless person, broke in? I don't know what it was. His voice was shaking. It was standing with its back to me, looking out the window. Tall, wearing something dark. I couldn't see details because the room was so dark. But I saw it. I saw someone standing there. What did you do? I ran, came back downstairs, locked myself in the living room. Called you. Did you call the police? And say what? I think I saw someone in my house, but I'm not sure. They'll never make it out here in this storm anyway. Roads are probably flooded. He was right. The storm was getting worse. Wind hammering against the windows, rain coming down in sheets. "We should at least check," I said. "Make sure nobody's up there." But neither of us moved toward the stairs. We just stood in that hallway, looking up into the darkness of the second floor. Finally, Callum grabbed the last of his stuff. "I'm staying at Mum's tonight. You coming?" Yeah, we walked out together, locking the door behind us. The wind nearly knocked us over as we hurried down the road toward our Mum's house. But before we got there, we had to walk past the ruin. I had walked past it 1,000 times. We all had. It sat just off the road, up a small slope, hidden in a cluster of trees, the remains of a stone house from the 1800s, left over from the Highland clearances. The clearances were a dark time in Scottish history. Landlords forcing families off their land, burning houses, leaving people to starve or emigrate. Thousands died. Thousands more lost everything. The ruins dotted the highlands, silent reminders of that suffering. Most of them felt benign, empty shells of stone that nobody thought twice about. But this one was different. Everyone said so. My mum, the neighbors, even tourists who walked past it felt uneasy. Dogs hated it. Our mum's old collie would growl every time we walked past, his hackles up, his body tense. Deer avoided the area even though there was good grazing nearby. And at night, when the streetlights didn't quite reach it, the ruin looked wrong. The walls stood at odd angles, creating shapes that looked almost human in the darkness. The empty windows seemed to watch you as you passed. Most people quickened their pace when they walked by it. Some crossed to the other side of the road. Nobody lingered there after dark. As Callum and I hurried past that night, fighting against the storm, I made the mistake of looking up at it. There was someone standing in one of the windows. I stopped so suddenly that Callum bumped into me. "What?" he asked. I pointed up at the ruin. There. In the window. "Do you see it?" He looked. The rain was coming down hard, making it difficult to see clearly, but there was definitely a dark shape in one of the empty window frames. Tall. Still. Watching. "It's just a shadow," Callum said, but his voice wasn't convincing. As we stood there staring, the shape moved. Not much. Just a slight shift, like someone turning their head to look at us. We ran. We ran down that road, like children fleeing a nightmare. The wind pushing against us. The rain soaking through our clothes. We didn't stop until we reached our mum's house and slammed the door behind us. Mum was in the living room, knitting by the fire. She looked up in surprise. "What are you two doing out in this weather?" We couldn't explain it. Not properly. "How do you tell your mother that you think something is haunting the village? That the ruin everyone avoids might actually be dangerous?" Callum stayed at Mum's that night. And the next night. And the night after that. He never went back to that house except to pack his things during the day. And even then, he made sure I came with him. We worked quickly, throwing everything into boxes, not bothering to organize or clean. The landlord wasn't happy about him breaking the lease, but Callum didn't care. He paid the penalty and moved into a small flat in the next village over, 15 miles down the coast. The house stood empty for months after that. Then a family from England moved in, looking for a quiet Highland lifestyle. They lasted 3 weeks. The wife told my mum later that they couldn't stand the noises. Footsteps upstairs, doors opening and closing, the feeling of being watched. Their young daughter refused to sleep in any of the upstairs bedrooms, said there was a sad man who stood by the window at night. After the English family left, the house stayed empty. The landlord eventually stopped trying to rent it. It still sits there, dark and silent, slowly falling into disrepair. And the ruin next to it watches over it all. I moved away from the Highlands not long after that winter, got a job in Edinburgh, found a flat, started a normal city life. Callum did the same, moving to Glasgow. But I go back sometimes to visit Mum. And when I do, I always end up walking past that ruin. It looks the same as it always did. Crumbling stone walls, empty windows, trees growing through what used to be the roof. But it feels different to me now. Before, it was just creepy, an old ruin in a village full of old ruins. Now I know there's something there. Something that watches. Something that remembers the suffering that happened during the clearances. The families torn apart. The homes burned. The deaths in the cold Highland winters, something that carries that pain and anger forward, year after year, generation after generation. My wife visited with me last month. We went for a walk along the coastal road, enjoying the spring sunshine and the purple heather just starting to bloom. When we approached the ruin, she stopped. "What's wrong?" I asked. "That building," she said, pointing. "It feels wrong, like we should stay away from it." She had never been there before. I had never told her the stories. She had no reason to feel that way, except for whatever presence lingered in those old stones. "Let's cross the road," I suggested. We did, walking quickly on the other side, putting distance between us and the ruin. But I looked back once. Just once. And I swear I saw someone standing in the window. Tall and dark and watching. I didn't tell my wife what I saw. I just took her hand and kept walking, not looking back again. That night, staying at Mum's house, I lay in my old bedroom and listened to the wind outside. The same wind that had blown the night Callum called me in fear. The same wind that howled across the moors and through the ruins, carrying voices from the past. And I thought about the people who used to live in that ruin. A family, probably. Parents and children. Maybe grandparents, too. Living their lives. Working the land. Surviving in one of the harshest environments in Scotland. Then one day, the landlord came, told them to leave, burned their house, left them with nothing. Did they die out there in the cold? Did they watch their home burn while their children cried? Did they curse the land, curse the people who did this to them, curse anyone who would come after? I think they did. I think something of that pain and rage stayed behind in those stones. I think it spread to the house Callum rented, the closest building to the ruin. I think it reaches out on cold Highland nights, looking for someone to share its suffering. Callum won't talk about that winter anymore. When I bring it up, he changes the subject. Says it was just stress and imagination. Says old houses make weird noises, and storms play tricks on your mind. But I know he doesn't believe that. I saw his face that night when we ran from the ruin. I heard his voice when he told me about the figure in the upstairs room. He knows the truth. Same as I do. Some places remember. Some pain doesn't fade. Some anger doesn't die. And in the northwest highlands of Scotland, in a small village by the sea, there's a ruin that watches and waits. Waits for someone to get too close. Waits for someone to stay too long. Waits for another cold Highland winter to spread its suffering to whoever is unlucky enough to be nearby. I won't be going back there in winter. I'll visit Mum in the summer, when the days are long and the heather is in bloom and the darkness can't reach out with cold fingers. But sometimes, even here in Edinburgh, on particularly cold nights when the wind sounds like it's coming from the north, I think about that ruin. I think about the figure in the window, the footsteps in empty rooms, the door handle rattling with no one there. I think about the family who died in the clearances. And I wonder if they'll ever find peace. I don't think they will. Some wounds are too deep. Some wrongs can never be righted. Some ghosts can never rest, and some places will always be haunted by what happened there, long after the people are gone and the stones have crumbled. The Northwest Highlands remember. The ruins remember. And they will never let anyone forget the suffering that happened there all those years ago. Never. Never.